My name is Emery Callahan, 68 years old, and after 30 years as a detective, I thought I had seen everything. Nothing prepared me for the day I buried my only son, Tyler. As mourners filed out of the cemetery, my daughter-in-law Amanda cornered me with cold eyes. "You have 10 minutes to get out of my house," she hissed. The woman my son had loved now stood before me as a stranger, not knowing the storm I would bring. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that subscribe button if you value family and justice, because this tale will show you both can prevail. I joined the police force fresh out of college with dreams of making a difference. Over 3 decades I worked my way up from patrol to becoming one of the most decorated detectives in the department. My specialty was financial crimes and fraud. I could spot a paper trail from a mile away and built cases that put dozens of white-collar criminals behind bars. My colleagues used to joke that I could find dirt on anyone if I looked hard enough. Little did I know this skill would one day be needed for a case much closer to home. My wife Sarah and I had Tyler when we were both 30. He was our miracle after years of trying. Sarah passed away from breast cancer when Tyler was only 8, leaving me to raise our boy alone. Those years shaped us both. I learned to be both father and mother, coaching Little League on weekends and helping with science projects late into the night. Tyler grew up respecting the badge and everything it stood for. He became a good man with a strong moral compass, or so I believed. After college, Tyler went into architectural design. He had his mother's creative eye and my attention to detail. He was building a solid career at a respected firm when he met Amanda at a charity gala 6 years ago. She worked in luxury real estate and had the kind of beauty that turned heads. Their romance was a whirlwind. Within 3 months, they were engaged. I remember the day Tyler brought her home to meet me. Amanda was all smiles and charm, but something felt off about her. Maybe it was the detective in me, noticing how her eyes never quite matched her smile, or how she steered every conversation toward money or status. But Tyler was happier than I had seen him in years, so I kept my reservations to myself. "Dad, she is the one," he told me, eyes bright with the certainty of youth. "We complement each other perfectly." Their wedding was lavish, far beyond what I thought they could afford on their combined salaries. When I questioned the expense, Tyler waved it away. "Amanda has connections. We got everything at a discount." That was the first red flag I should have investigated further. After the wedding, their lifestyle escalated. They moved into a rental in an exclusive neighborhood, designer clothes, luxury vacations, a new sports car for Tyler. I never understood how they financed it all. Whenever I broached the subject, Tyler would change the topic or say Amanda's family had helped them. 3 years into their marriage, they decided to buy a house. It was a beautiful colonial with 4 bedrooms and a sprawling backyard in one of the most prestigious neighborhoods in town. The price tag was well over $1 million. "We want to put down roots, Dad," Tyler explained during Sunday dinner. "Start thinking about giving you grandchildren." Amanda chimed in, "But the down payment is steeper than we expected. We are just a little short." That evening ended with me agreeing to invest in their future. I had saved carefully throughout my career and had a substantial retirement fund. I contributed 70% of the down payment, with the agreement that I would be on the deed as co-owner. We drew up legal documents, had everything notarized. It was supposed to be an investment in my son's future and my own golden years if I ever needed to sell my share. "This means the world to us," Tyler said, hugging me tightly after we signed the papers. Amanda's smile didn't quite reach her eyes as she added, "We will make sure it is worth every penny." Life continued smoothly for the next 2 years. I would visit for dinner once a week. Tyler and I maintained our tradition of fishing trips twice a year. Amanda was always polite but distant during these gatherings, often excusing herself to take calls or work on her laptop. Then came the day Tyler called me, voice shaking. "Dad, I need you to come over. The doctor found something." The diagnosis was devastating. Pancreatic cancer, already stage 4 by the time they caught it. The oncologist gave him 6 months, but Tyler's condition deteriorated much faster than anyone expected. I moved in temporarily to help care for him. Amanda agreed, though not enthusiastically. "Just until we can arrange for professional care," she stipulated. But as Tyler grew weaker, it became clear he wanted his father there. How could I refuse? Those 3 months living under the same roof with Amanda revealed sides of her I had never seen before. She was often absent, claiming work demands kept her busy. When home, she spent more time on her phone than with her dying husband. I caught glimpses of text messages from someone saved as B in her contacts. Late-night calls she took in the backyard, speaking in hushed tones. One night, when Tyler was heavily sedated from pain medication, I overheard Amanda in her home office. "Just a few more weeks," she whispered urgently. "Everything is falling into place. Be patient." I should have confronted her then, but all my energy was focused on making Tyler's final days comfortable. My detective instincts were dulled by grief and exhaustion. In his final week, Tyler had a moment of clarity. He gripped my hand with surprising strength and said, "Dad, I made some mistakes. There are things you should know about." Before he could finish, Amanda entered with the hospice nurse for his medication. That was the last coherent conversation we had. Tyler slipped into a coma the next day and passed away 48 hours later, with both of us by his bedside. I was shattered. My boy, my only child, gone at 38. The pain was unlike anything I had ever experienced, worse even than losing Sarah. At least with her, I had time to prepare, to say everything that needed saying. With Tyler, it felt like so much was left unresolved. The morning of Tyler's funeral dawned bright and clear, a beautiful September day that felt like a mockery of the darkness inside me. I stood before the mirror, fingers fumbling with my tie, the same one I had worn to Tyler's college graduation. The house was quiet except for the occasional sounds of Amanda moving about her bedroom down the hall. We had barely spoken since Tyler's last breath, existing in parallel in the house that suddenly felt too large, too empty. The funeral home had done an excellent job. Tyler looked peaceful in his casket, wearing the blue suit he had married Amanda in. I placed his mother's wedding ring in his pocket, a private gesture to connect him with Sarah wherever they were now. As I stood vigil before the service began, I noticed how few people from Amanda's side had come to pay respects. Just her parents and a sister, standing stiffly near the entrance, barely acknowledging me. The service was well attended. Tyler had been well liked in the community, and my former colleagues from the police department showed up in force. Captain Rivera, my old partner, clasped my shoulder. "We are all here for you, Emery. Anything you need." Through it all, Amanda sat beside me, dry-eyed and composed in an expensive black dress that seemed more appropriate for a business meeting than a funeral. She checked her phone repeatedly. Even during the eulogy I struggled to deliver without breaking down. At the cemetery, as they lowered my son into the ground, I noticed a man standing at the periphery of the gathering. Tall, well-dressed, with the confident stance of someone used to commanding attention. When our eyes met briefly, he looked away and stepped further back behind a large memorial. I did not recognize him from Tyler's friends or colleagues. Following tradition, we invited close family and friends back to the house after the burial. Amanda had arranged catering, turning the somber gathering into something resembling a cocktail party. I retreated to the den, Tyler's favorite room with his architectural books and the fishing trophies we had won together. Captain Rivera found me there, offering a glass of whiskey and silent companionship. "Something feels off about all this," he murmured after a while. "Your daughter-in-law seems..." "Detached," I supplied. "She has been since before Tyler passed." Rivera nodded thoughtfully. "The department still considers you family, Emery. If you need anything investigated..." Before he could finish, Amanda appeared in the doorway. "Excuse me," she said with a tight smile that did not reach her eyes. "Could I have a moment alone with my father-in-law?" Rivera squeezed my shoulder as he left, a silent message of support. The door had barely closed behind him when Amanda's demeanor changed completely. Her smile vanished, replaced by cold determination. "I think it is time we discussed your living arrangements," she began, voice clipped and businesslike. I stared at her, momentarily unable to comprehend her meaning. "My living arrangements?" "Yes. As you know, I will be sorting through Tyler's affairs now, and I need space to do that. I appreciate your help during his illness, but your presence is no longer required." The words felt like physical blows. "Amanda, this house is still partly mine. I contributed to the down payment. I am on the deed." Her laugh was brittle and dismissive. "About that. I have been speaking with my attorney. There were irregularities in those arrangements. Besides, Tyler made changes to his will and various documents before he passed." She moved toward the door and opened it, gesturing for me to follow. I did, confusion and dread building with each step. She led me through the house where mourners were still gathered, speaking in hushed tones over plates of untouched food. At the front door, she stopped and turned to me. "You should know I have changed the locks effective tomorrow morning." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. "You have 10 minutes to get out. This is my house now." The room fell silent. Dozens of eyes turned toward us, witnessing my humiliation. I stood frozen, the envelope containing what I assumed was a copy of some legal document hanging between us. "If you are not gone by then, I will call security," she continued, voice rising slightly. "Take only your personal items, nothing else." The man I had noticed at the cemetery appeared beside her, placing a proprietary hand on her shoulder. Up close, I could see his expensive watch and the confident smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, eyeing me as if I were some unwelcome intruder. In that moment, decades of police training kicked in. Never show weakness, never let them see you rattled. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and smiled. Not a warm smile, but the kind I used to give suspects when I had just found the piece of evidence that would undo them. "No problem at all," I said calmly, taking the envelope without opening it. "I will be in touch through proper channels." I walked upstairs with as much dignity as I could muster, aware of the shocked whispers following me. In Tyler's room, now stripped of medical equipment, I gathered the few things that mattered: photos of us together, the watch I had given him on his 21st birthday, and a flash drive containing family photos I had been organizing to cheer him up during his illness. When I came back downstairs, most of the guests had left, obviously uncomfortable with the scene they had witnessed. My old colleagues lingered, concern evident in their expressions. Captain Rivera approached, but I shook my head slightly. "Not here, not now." At the door, Amanda stood with her new man, both watching impassively as I walked past them. I paused briefly, looked her straight in the eyes, and said quietly, "My son deserved better than you." Then I walked to my car, placed the small box of memories on the passenger seat, and drove away from the house I had helped buy, where my son had spent his final days. I did not look back, but in the rear-view mirror, I saw Amanda's companion draw her into an embrace that seemed far too intimate for a grieving widow on the day of her husband's funeral. The Hampton Inn became my temporary home. Sitting on the edge of the generic hotel bed that first night, surrounded by beige walls and bland artwork, the full weight of what had happened crushed down on me. I had lost not only my son, but my connection to the life we had built together. The few photographs I had managed to salvage stared back at me from the bedside table, Tyler's smile frozen in happier times. Sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Amanda's cold face as she demanded I leave. The strategic part of my brain, the detective who had built cases against criminals for decades, began to stir beneath the fog of grief. Something was not right about any of this. The timing, the new man at her side, the alleged changes to documents I had helped create. Morning brought clarity and purpose. I showered, dressed, and ordered a substantial breakfast. If I was going to fight, I needed strength. Over coffee and eggs, I began to organize my thoughts, making lists on hotel stationery. First, the house. I remembered every detail of our arrangement. The legal documents had been drawn up by Jackson Pierce, an attorney who had helped the department with several cases over the years. I trusted him implicitly. We had signed everything in his office, had it notarized and filed properly. I had copies in my safe deposit box at First National. Second, Tyler's will. He had created one after marrying Amanda, leaving everything to her naturally, but with provisions for certain sentimental items to come to me. Had he really changed it during his illness? When would he have had the opportunity, given how heavily medicated he was in those final months? Third, the mysterious man at Amanda's side. Who was he, and how long had he been in the picture? I called Jackson first, arranging to meet him that afternoon. Then I reached out to Captain Rivera, who answered on the first ring, as if he had been waiting for my call. "I knew something was fishy," he said after I explained the situation. "That woman has ice in her veins. What do you need from me?" "Information," I replied. "I need to know who the man with Amanda is. Tall, around 40, salt and pepper hair, expensive taste. And I need to know if there have been any legal filings regarding changes to Tyler's will or the house deed." "Consider it done," Rivera promised. "And Emery? Stay at my place until this is sorted out. Maggie would love the company. I declined politely. I needed solitude and focus for what was coming. Jackson's office was exactly as I remembered it, wood-paneled and smelling of leather and old books. He listened gravely as I recounted the events at the funeral, his expression darkening. "I have the original documents right here," he said, pulling a thick file from his cabinet. "Your arrangement was ironclad, Emery. 70% ownership in exchange for 70% of the down payment. Tyler would need your signature to make any changes." Could Amanda have convinced him to do something without my knowledge? Jackson's expression was thoughtful. "Not legally, no. But if she had him sign something while he was on heavy medication, if she found a less scrupulous attorney to draft documents." He trailed off, the implications clear. "I need to see what is in that envelope she gave me," I said, pulling it from my pocket where it had sat like a live grenade since the funeral. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A notice claiming all my rights to the property had been transferred to Tyler exclusively 3 months ago, with his full ownership then passing to Amanda upon his death according to his updated will. It was dated just 2 weeks after his diagnosis. My signature was at the bottom. "This is a forgery," I said immediately. "I never signed this." Jackson examined it closely. "It is a good one, but I agree. The notary stamp is from someone I do not recognize. We will need a handwriting expert to confirm." By the time I left Jackson's office, we had a plan in motion. He would file emergency injunctions to prevent Amanda from selling the property or removing assets while we investigated. I would gather evidence of the fraud. Over the next week, I threw myself into the investigation with the same methodical precision that had made me a successful detective. Each morning I woke with a purpose. Each night I fell asleep surrounded by notes and documents. Captain Rivera came through with information about Amanda's mystery man. His name was Bradley Weiss, a real estate developer with a reputation for questionable business practices and 2 previous fraud investigations that had been settled out of court. "They have known each other for at least 2 years, Rivera reported. "Multiple witnesses have seen them together at hotels and restaurants outside of town. One of my contacts in the department says there was an anonymous tip about their relationship 6 months ago, but nothing came of it since adultery is not a crime." 2 years. While Tyler was still healthy, while they were still playing the happy couple, my banking contacts provided another breakthrough. Tyler and Amanda's finances were a mess of transfers and unexplained withdrawals. In the months following Tyler's diagnosis, large sums had moved from their joint accounts to an LLC registered in Amanda's maiden name. The most damning evidence came from Tyler's office. His assistant Karen had always liked me, and she was devastated by his death. When I explained my suspicions, she gave me access to his work, email, and files. "He was so confused in those last few months," she said, wiping tears. "He would call me asking about documents he supposedly signed, meetings he supposedly had. I thought it was the medication affecting his memory." In his email, I found messages from Amanda forwarding documents for his review that he apparently returned, signed the same day. Given his condition at that time, it was highly unlikely he had read anything thoroughly, if at all. Tyler's best friend Michael provided another piece of the puzzle. "Tyler called me about a month before he passed. He confided over coffee. He was having doubts about Amanda. Said she was acting strange, taking calls in private, disappearing for hours. He mentioned wanting to talk to you about the house arrangement, making sure you were protected no matter what." That matched what Tyler had tried to tell me in his final lucid moment. He had been trying to warn me. The most shocking discovery came from an unexpected source. The hospice nurse who had cared for Tyler in his final weeks contacted me after hearing about the funeral confrontation through mutual acquaintances. "I should have said something sooner," she admitted, clearly uncomfortable. "But I saw Mrs. Callahan giving your son extra medication several times, more than what was prescribed. When I questioned her, she said it was cleared with the doctor. I checked, and it was not." "Are you saying she was deliberately over-medicating him?" I asked, feeling sick. "I cannot prove intent," she replied cautiously, "but it kept him sedated, unable to communicate clearly. And twice I found her with legal papers by his bed after she had given him extra doses." The picture becoming clearer was ugly beyond anything I had imagined. Amanda had not only been cheating on my son but had used his illness as an opportunity to secure his assets, possibly even hastening his decline to expedite her plans with Bradley. By the end of 2 weeks I had compiled a comprehensive dossier, financial records showing suspicious transfers, witness statements from the hospice nurse, Tyler's assistant, and friends. Expert analysis confirming the forged signature on the property transfer. Evidence of Amanda's long-standing relationship with Bradley. Medical records showing discrepancies in Tyler's medication administration. It totaled 847 pages of damning evidence, professionally bound and indexed. The detective in me had created a case file that would stand up in any court. The father in me had created a testament to the betrayal of my son. I made multiple copies, sending one to Jackson, one to a trusted friend at the district attorney's office, and keeping the original in a secure location. Then I waited, allowing the legal machinery I had set in motion to build momentum. Amanda had no idea what was coming. With my initial investigation complete, I moved from the hotel to a small rental apartment. I needed a proper base of operations, a place to spread out my documents and evidence, to think clearly and strategize. The apartment was sparsely furnished, but it had a second bedroom I converted into an investigation room, complete with a large corkboard where I mapped connections between Amanda, Bradley, and their various activities. My first official meeting with the district attorney's office took place 3 weeks after the funeral. Eleanor Diaz had been a prosecutor when I was still on the force, and we had worked several cases together. Now she was an assistant DA, and her expression was grave as she reviewed the evidence I had compiled. "This is not just civil fraud, Emery," she said finally. "We are looking at potential criminal charges here. Forgery, financial fraud, possibly even medical neglect, or worse." "I want everything by the book," I insisted. "No special treatment because of my law enforcement background. I want this case to be airtight." Eleanor nodded. "We will need to interview all these witnesses formally, get official statements. The forensic accountants will need to go through these financial records with a fine-tooth comb." "Whatever it takes," I agreed. "I have nothing but time." Over the next month, I worked alongside Eleanor and her team, helping to build the case methodically. Each day brought new discoveries, new connections that made the picture even clearer. Amanda had been planning this for longer than I had initially suspected. We found evidence of 2 previous marriages in Amanda's past, both to wealthy men, both ending shortly after large asset transfers. She had changed her name slightly each time, making the pattern harder to detect without deep background checks. Tyler had been her 3rd husband, and it appeared Bradley was being groomed as her 4th. "She is a professional at this," remarked one of the financial investigators after tracing her history. "This is not opportunistic behavior. This is a calculated long-term strategy." The most painful discoveries were the ones that showed how Tyler had been manipulated in his final months. Medical records confirmed the hospice nurse's suspicions. Amanda had been requesting higher doses of pain medication than prescribed, keeping Tyler sedated and confused. We found evidence that she had moved valuable items from the house during that time, preparing for her exit even as my son lay dying. Bank records showed she had been systematically draining their accounts, moving assets to offshore locations linked to Bradley's business interests. I interviewed Tyler's doctor personally, a compassionate oncologist who was horrified by our findings. "I had concerns about Mrs. Callahan's level of involvement in his care," he admitted. "She often insisted on managing his medications herself, claimed he was in more pain than he reported to me during examinations. I should have been more assertive." Each new piece of evidence was carefully documented, each witness statement recorded and verified. I approached the task with professional detachment during the day, but nights were different. Alone in my temporary apartment, surrounded by the evidence of Amanda's betrayal, grief, and rage, would overcome me. How had I not seen this coming? How had I failed to protect my son? On particularly difficult nights, I would call Michael, Tyler's best friend since college. He had been keeping a respectful distance from Amanda since the funeral, but he had his ear to the ground. "She and Bradley moved into the house together last week," he reported during one late-night call. "They are renovating, changing everything Tyler designed. And get this, they are planning to sell. I heard it from a realtor friend. The house is going on the market next month." That news spurred us to accelerate our timeline. Jackson filed additional injunctions to prevent the sale of the property while ownership was in dispute. The judge, reviewing our preliminary evidence, granted a temporary freeze on all assets connected to the house. 6 weeks after the funeral, we were ready to present our case to the grand jury for potential criminal indictments. Eleanor had built a solid prosecution strategy based on the evidence I had gathered. The 847-page report had grown to over 1,000 pages with official statements, expert analyses, and legal filings. "We have enough for multiple felony charges," Eleanor assured me the night before the grand jury presentation. "Financial fraud, forgery, potential elder abuse given Tyler's impaired condition, possible medical neglect. She will not walk away from this, Emery." "And the house?" I asked. This had never been about the money for me, but the principle. That house represented my investment in Tyler's future, a future Amanda had stolen. "The civil case is strong," Jackson confirmed, joining our conference call. "With the evidence of forgery and the original documentation we have, I am confident the court will recognize your ownership stake." That night, I slept soundly for the first time since Tyler's diagnosis. The wheels of justice were turning. Amanda would soon face the consequences of her actions. I dreamt of Tyler as a boy, the two of us fishing on the lake near our old cabin. In the dream, he looked at me with his mother's eyes and said, "You did good, Dad." The next morning, as I prepared for the grand jury proceedings, Captain Rivera called with breaking news. "We just got a warrant to search Amanda and Bradley's financial records based on your evidence. The forensic accountants found something big. They have been moving money through a complex network of shell companies, not just for this scam, but for multiple real estate frauds across 3 states. This is much bigger than we thought." The grand jury convened at 10 that morning. I testified for over 3 hours, presenting the evidence we had gathered with the clear, methodical precision I had used in countless trials during my law enforcement career. Looking at the jurors' faces, I could see the impact of our case. The shock, the disgust, the sympathy. By late afternoon, the grand jury had returned indictments on multiple counts. Amanda and Bradley would be facing charges for financial fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and elder abuse related to Tyler's compromised condition during his illness. Eleanor called me the moment the indictments were formalized. "We got everything we asked for, Emery. Arrest warrants are being processed now. They will be served first thing tomorrow morning." That evening, I sat in my sparse apartment, looking at the framed photo of Tyler I kept beside me. "It is not over yet, son," I told him quietly, "but justice is coming." I poured a single glass of the whiskey we used to share on special occasions, raised it in a silent toast, and prepared myself for what tomorrow would bring. I woke before dawn, too restless to sleep. Today was the day Amanda would finally face consequences. I showered, shaved carefully, and dressed in my best suit, the one I had worn to Tyler's college graduation. Today I was not just a grieving father but a man seeking justice for his son. Captain Rivera had insisted on picking me up. "You should not be alone today," he said firmly when I tried to decline. "Besides, I want to see this with my own eyes." He arrived at 6:30, thermos of coffee in hand. "They are serving the warrants at 7, he explained, as we drove toward the house that should have been partly mine. "The officers have been briefed. They know the situation." We parked a discreet distance away, on a side street with a clear view of the house. At precisely 7, 2 police cruisers and an unmarked sedan pulled up to the curb. 4 officers and a detective I recognized from the fraud division approached the door. Even from our vantage point, I could hear the insistent ringing of the doorbell. It took several minutes before the door opened. Bradley appeared first, wearing an expensive bathrobe, his expression changing from annoyance to alarm as he registered the officers. Words were exchanged that we could not hear. Then the officers moved forward, entering the house despite Bradley's obvious protests. Minutes later, Amanda emerged, being escorted to one of the cruisers. Even from a distance, I could see she was arguing vehemently, gesturing with handcuffed hands. The detective handed her what I knew were copies of the search and arrest warrants. She seemed to deflate as she read them, her shoulders slumping in defeat, or perhaps resignation. Bradley followed shortly after, similarly restrained, directed toward the second cruiser. His face was a mask of cold fury as an officer guided him into the back seat. "It is really happening," I murmured, more to myself than to Rivera. "Justice sometimes takes time," he replied, squeezing my shoulder, "but it usually arrives." We followed the cruisers to the police station, where I had been asked to be available for any questions that might arise during the initial processing. The station was achingly familiar, filled with memories of my career. Officers I had known for years nodded respectfully as I passed. Amanda and Bradley were processed separately. I caught a glimpse of her being led to an interview room, her designer outfit incongruous in the stark setting. Our eyes met briefly across the bullpen. The hatred in her gaze was palpable, but beneath it, I detected something else: fear. The arraignment was scheduled for that afternoon. Eleanor met me for lunch beforehand, reviewing what would happen. "They will almost certainly plead not guilty," she explained. "Their attorneys will argue for bail. Given the flight risk and the severity of the charges, we are requesting remand, but realistically, they will probably get bail with monitoring. What matters is that the case moves forward," I said, "that the truth comes out." The courtroom was more crowded than I expected. Word had spread quickly about the case, attracting attention from local media. I sat directly behind Eleanor at the prosecution table, spine straight, eyes forward. Amanda and Bradley were brought in separately, each flanked by expensive-looking attorneys. Amanda had changed into a conservative navy suit, her hair pulled back demurely, projecting an image of respectability that made my stomach turn. She did not look in my direction. The charges were read aloud, a damning litany of fraud, forgery, elder abuse, and conspiracy. As expected, both entered not guilty pleas. The bail arguments were heated, with the defense painting their clients as respected members of the community, while Eleanor methodically listed the reasons they presented flight risks, including multiple offshore accounts and properties registered under aliases. In the end, the judge set bail at $2 million each, with electronic monitoring and surrender of passports. A small victory, but I took satisfaction in watching Amanda's face as the amount was announced. Her composed facade cracked momentarily, revealing the calculation beneath as she whispered urgently to her attorney. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. Eleanor handled the press expertly, outlining the charges without revealing details that could compromise the case. I remained silent at her side, my presence making its own statement. One aggressive reporter shouted a question directly at me. "Mr. Callahan, how does it feel to see your daughter-in-law in handcuffs?" I paused, then responded carefully. "This is not about personal feelings. This is about justice for my son, whose trust was betrayed in the worst possible way during his final days. I have faith in the legal system to uncover the full truth." In the days that followed, the case expanded beyond anything we had initially anticipated. The search of Amanda and Bradley's records revealed a pattern of fraud extending far beyond my son and the house we had shared. They had been running sophisticated real estate scams for years, targeting vulnerable individuals with valuable properties. "We have identified at least 7 other victims," Eleanor informed me during one of our regular updates. "Elderly homeowners, terminally ill property owners, recently widowed individuals. They would insert themselves into these people's lives, gain their trust, and manipulate documents to gain control of properties." The district attorney's office added multiple counts of fraud and elder abuse to the indictments. What had begun as my personal quest for justice was expanding into a major case that could put Amanda and Bradley away for decades. 3 weeks after the arrests, Jackson called with news on the civil side of our case. "The judge has reviewed all the evidence of forgery and the original property documents. She has issued a preliminary ruling invalidating the fraudulent transfer. Your ownership stake in the property is secure pending the final hearing." That afternoon, with a court order in hand and accompanied by a sheriff's deputy, I returned to the house for the first time since the funeral. Standing in the entryway, I was struck by how much had changed in such a short time. The walls had been repainted, Tyler's photographs removed, his presence systematically erased. In what had been Tyler's home office, now converted to a female-dominated space with Amanda's touches everywhere, I found a hidden safe behind a newly installed bookshelf. The deputy documented as we opened it, revealing a cache of documents: fraudulent deed transfers, forged signatures, notary stamps, and multiple sets of identification in various names. "This is a goldmine for the prosecution," the evidence technician remarked as she carefully bagged and labeled each item. It was in the master bedroom that I made the most painful discovery. In a locked drawer of what had been Tyler's nightstand, now repurposed for Amanda's jewelry, I found a small voice recorder. With trembling hands, I pressed play. Tyler's voice, weak but determined, filled the room. "Dad, if you are finding this, then my suspicions were right. Amanda has been acting strange, moving money, having me sign things I can barely read. I am trying to stay lucid enough to figure out what is happening, but the medication makes it hard." I wanted to protect you, protect your investment in this house. I have duplicate copies of all our original agreements in the storage unit we rented last year. The key is in my fishing tackle box in the garage. I love you, Dad. I hope I am wrong about all this, but if I am not, do not let her get away with it." The recording was dated just 2 weeks before he passed away, during a period when Amanda had gone to visit her parents for the weekend. Tyler had been more clear-headed than usual during that brief window, enough to record his suspicions. I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the recorder, tears streaming down my face. Even in his final weeks, fighting pain and medication fog, Tyler had been trying to protect me. My boy, my son. Showing the same determination and sense of justice I had tried to instill in him. The deputy and evidence technician respectfully stepped out, giving me a moment alone. When I emerged, recorder secured as evidence, my resolve was stronger than ever. This was no longer just about the house or the money. This was about honoring Tyler's final efforts to expose the truth. The media attention intensified as more victims came forward. Amanda and Bradley's scheme made headlines, their carefully constructed facade of respectability crumbling under scrutiny. Former associates distanced themselves, providing additional evidence in exchange for leniency in their own legal troubles. 6 weeks after the arrests, Amanda's attorney approached Eleanor about a potential plea deal. She is willing to provide evidence against Bradley, claim he was the mastermind, Eleanor told me during our weekly meeting. In exchange, she wants reduced charges. "And what do you think?" I asked, although I already knew my preference. Eleanor's smile was grim. I told them the evidence clearly shows she was an equal partner, if not the actual architect of these schemes. The offer was declined. We are proceeding to trial. That night, I returned to my small apartment and added the day's developments to my ongoing record of the case. The original 847-page report had grown substantially, documenting every legal motion, every new piece of evidence, every step toward justice. As I closed the updated file, my phone rang. It was Michael, Tyler's best friend, Emery. "I just heard from Karen at Tyler's office. They found something while cleaning out his old files. Letters he wrote to you during his illness but never sent. She thought you should have them." Another piece of Tyler returning to me. Another connection I thought had been lost. I scheduled a meeting with Karen for the following morning, then sat looking at the photograph of Tyler that had become my constant companion. "We are getting there, son," I told his smiling image. "The truth is coming out just like you wanted." 3 months after Amanda and Bradley's arrests, with the preliminary hearings completed and a trial date set, their attorneys requested a settlement conference. The prosecution had built such an overwhelming case that they were finally facing reality. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday morning at the district attorney's office. I arrived early, reviewing my notes one final time with Jackson. We had prepared for every possible scenario, every argument their defense might make. "Remember, this is potentially about both the criminal and civil aspects," Jackson reminded me. "They may try to use one to leverage the other." Eleanor joined us in the conference room, her expression confident. "We have them cornered, and they know it. They are hoping to salvage something, but we are negotiating from a position of strength." At precisely 10 o'clock, Amanda and Bradley were brought in, accompanied by their attorneys. Amanda had lost weight during the pre-trial proceedings, her designer clothes hanging loosely on her frame. Bradley looked equally diminished, his formerly confident demeanor replaced by nervous gestures and darting eyes. They sat across the table, carefully avoiding my gaze. Their lead attorney, a silver-haired man named Harrington with a reputation for aggressive defense tactics, opened the discussion. "My clients recognize that this situation has become unnecessarily contentious," he began smoothly. "We believe a reasonable settlement would serve all parties and spare the emotional burden of a lengthy trial." Eleanor's response was measured but firm. "The people are prepared to consider reasonable offers, but given the extensive evidence and multiple victims, any agreement would need to include substantial penalties and restitution." For the next hour, proposals were exchanged. Bradley's attorney suggested separating his case from Amanda's, arguing she had been the primary actor. Amanda's team countered that she had been manipulated by Bradley's business expertise, each trying to shift blame to save themselves. Throughout their maneuvering, I remained silent, watching. The detective in me noted their tells, the glances they exchanged, the tension between them as their united front crumbled. The father in me observed the woman who had betrayed my son in his most vulnerable moments, searching for any sign of remorse and finding none. When their attorneys proposed a deal that would have resulted in minimal jail time and allowed them to keep substantial assets, I finally spoke. "May I address the room?" I asked Eleanor, who nodded. I opened the binder containing key elements from my investigation, now supplemented with official findings. "I have here documented evidence of 17 separate instances of fraud committed against my son during the last months of his life. I have medical records showing Miss Callahan deliberately over-medicated him to obtain signatures. I have financial records showing systematic theft of his assets while he was dying." My voice remained steady as I turned a page. "I have voice recordings my son made expressing his suspicions and fears. I have testimony from the hospice nurse who witnessed manipulation of his medication. I have evidence of Miss Callahan's relationship with Mr. Weiss, dating back 2 years before my son's diagnosis." Page by page, I laid out the case I had built, not with anger or accusation, but with the methodical precision that had made me an effective detective. Facts, evidence, truth. This was not a momentary lapse of judgment, I concluded. This was a calculated, sustained campaign to take advantage of a dying man, my son. I am not interested in a deal that allows either of you to walk away with the proceeds of this cruelty. The room fell silent when I finished. Amanda stared at the table, knuckles white where she gripped the edge. Bradley looked physically ill. Their attorneys huddled together, whispering urgently. Eleanor used the moment to press our advantage. The prosecution's position is simple: full confession, full restitution to all victims, substantial prison time. In exchange, we will not pursue the maximum sentences on all counts, which would effectively be life imprisonment. After another hour of tense negotiation, with multiple breaks for the defense to consult privately, they surrendered. Amanda broke first, turning on Bradley in a display of self-preservation that was almost predictable. He retaliated with revelations about schemes I had not even discovered. By late afternoon, we had the framework of an agreement. Both would plead guilty to multiple felony counts. They would forfeit all assets derived from their fraudulent activities. They would serve substantial prison sentences, Amanda facing 8 to 12 years, Bradley 12 to 15 due to his prior record. Most importantly, for me personally, Amanda would relinquish all claims to the house and Tyler's other assets. My ownership stake would be fully restored, and the remaining portion would revert to Tyler's estate, to be distributed according to his original will, not the fraudulent document created during his illness. As the meeting concluded and they were escorted out, Amanda paused beside my chair. For a moment, I thought she might offer some explanation, some expression of remorse. Instead, she leaned down and whispered, "He never loved you as much as you think. He told me how controlling you were, how he resented you." It was a final attempt to wound me, to salvage something from her defeat. I looked her in the eyes and replied calmly, "I found the letters he wrote me during his illness, the ones you hid. I know exactly how he felt." The color drained from her face. She had not known about those letters, discovered in Tyler's office after her arrest. Letters expressing his love, his gratitude for my care during his illness, his growing suspicions about her behavior. 1 week later, Amanda and Bradley appeared in court to enter their guilty pleas. The judge, after reviewing the case files and victim statements, accepted the plea agreement but added additional conditions, including restrictions on future financial activities after their release. "The court rarely sees such calculated cruelty," the judge remarked during sentencing. "Taking advantage of a dying man, betraying the most sacred trust between husband and wife." The defendants have expressed remorse today, but their actions over months and years tell a different story. Amanda was led away in handcuffs, heading to the women's correctional facility to begin her sentence. She did not look back, did not acknowledge me sitting in the front row of the courtroom. Bradley followed soon after, destined for a different facility. The next day, with the legal proceedings concluded, I returned to the house with Jackson and a locksmith. We changed every lock, reset every security code. I walked through each room, reacquainting myself with the space that had been partly mine all along, yet from which I had been so cruelly ejected. In what had been Tyler's bedroom, I found a loose floorboard containing a small metal box. Inside were more treasures Amanda had failed to discover. Photographs of Tyler and me from his childhood, the medal he had received for saving a child from drowning in high school, letters from his mother I had given him after her death. The most precious item was a handwritten note dated just days before he passed away. "Dad, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I'm trying to stay clear-headed enough to tell you what I suspect, but it's getting harder. If something happens to me, know that you were the best father anyone could have asked for. Everything you taught me about integrity and justice matters. I love you, Tyler." I sat on the floor of his room, holding that note, and finally allowed myself to fully grieve. Not just for Tyler's death, but for everything that had happened after. The betrayal, the fight for justice, the painful revelations. I cried until there were no tears left, then picked myself up, carefully stored my son's treasures, and continued the process of reclaiming the home we had shared. Over the following weeks, I made the house mine. Not by erasing Tyler's presence, as Amanda had tried to do, but by honoring it. I restored his photographs to the walls, set up his architectural awards in the study, and created a special room dedicated to his memory, filled with the things he had loved. With the legal battles concluded and justice served, I could finally focus on healing. The house that had been a source of such conflict became a sanctuary, a place where I could feel close to Tyler and begin to make peace with all that had happened. The first night I spent back in the house was strange, filled with mixed emotions. I felt Tyler's absence acutely in every room, yet also sensed his presence in the space he had designed and loved. I chose to sleep in the guest room rather than the master bedroom, not yet ready to reclaim the space where he had spent his final days. Morning brought a sense of purpose. I opened all the windows, letting fresh air flow through rooms that had been closed and changed during Amanda's brief reign. The process of restoration had begun, not just of the physical space but of my connection to my son and my own healing journey. In those early days, I focused on practical tasks, sorting through belongings, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to store. Each item told a story. Each decision was part of the grieving process. Tyler's clothes, still hanging in the closet despite Amanda's renovations elsewhere, carried his scent. I found myself sitting on the floor of his closet, holding his favorite sweater, transported by memory to happier times. The house gradually transformed from a symbol of betrayal to a living memorial. I reinstalled the built-in bookshelves Tyler had designed, displaying his architectural books and the models he had created. The fishing trophies we had won together returned to their place of honor in the den. His photographs once again lined the hallway, a visual timeline of his life from smiling toddler to accomplished young man. Friends became my lifeline during this period. Michael visited regularly, bringing dinner and stories about Tyler I had never heard. "Remember when he tried to build that treehouse in your backyard?" he reminisced one evening. "The plans were so complex you needed an engineering degree to understand them." He was only 12 but already thinking like an architect. Captain Rivera and his wife invited me for Sunday dinners, providing the family connection I sorely needed. Karen from Tyler's office helped me organize his professional accomplishments, creating a portfolio of his work that showcased his talent. 3 months after moving back in, I finally felt ready to tackle the master bedroom. I stripped it completely, removing all traces of Amanda's brief occupation. New paint, new bedding, new purpose. What had been their shared bedroom became my study, filled with books and mementos, a place of reflection and peace. In clearing out the attic space, I made an unexpected discovery. A sealed box, labeled in Tyler's handwriting, "For Dad, open when you're ready." Inside were letters he had written over the years but never shared, journal entries about our relationship, and a manuscript. The manuscript was titled "Building Foundations: Lessons from My Father." Tyler had been writing a book about our relationship, about the values and principles I had taught him. It was unfinished, interrupted by his illness, but the completed chapters were beautifully written, full of anecdotes and insights that brought fresh tears to my eyes. "My father taught me that integrity isn't just about following rules," he had written. "It's about doing what's right, even when it's difficult, even when no one is watching. It's the foundation everything else is built upon." Reading his words, I felt a connection beyond death. Tyler had understood the lessons I tried to teach him. He had valued our relationship as deeply as I had. In his writing, he lived on, his voice clear and present. Inspired by his manuscript, I began a project of my own. I established the Tyler Callahan Scholarship Fund for architecture students using part of the settlement money from the case. The first recipient was a talented young woman from Tyler's alma mater with a vision for sustainable urban design that would have fascinated my son. 6 months after the conclusion of the legal proceedings, I hosted a memorial gathering at the house. Not a somber affair, but a celebration of Tyler's life and legacy. Friends, colleagues, former classmates filled the rooms with laughter and stories. We projected photographs on the living room wall, shared meals he had loved, and toasted his memory. "Tyler would have loved this," Michael said as we stood looking out over the backyard where guests mingled, seeing his home full of people who cared about him. "Not just his home," I corrected gently. "His legacy. Everything here, the scholarship, the memories we share, they're all part of how he lives on." That night, after everyone had gone and the house was quiet again, I sat in the den with a glass of Tyler's favorite whiskey. "We did it, son," I said aloud to his photograph. "Justice was served. Your name was cleared. Your memory is honored." For the first time, the silence that followed did not feel empty. It felt peaceful, almost companionable. The 1-year anniversary of Tyler's passing brought another milestone in my healing journey. I visited his grave alone, bringing fresh flowers and news of the scholarship recipients. 2 students this year, I told him, sitting beside the headstone. Both talented, both passionate about architecture. You would have mentored them brilliantly. As the seasons changed, so did my relationship with grief. The sharp, constant pain gradually transformed into something more bearable, more integrated into my daily life. I still missed Tyler every day, still felt the injustice of his early death, but I found ways to honor him by living fully. I volunteered with a hospice organization, offering support to families going through what I had experienced. My background in law enforcement proved unexpectedly valuable as I helped identify and prevent potential financial abuse of vulnerable patients. Each family I helped was a tribute to Tyler, a way of creating meaning from our tragedy. The house evolved as I did. No longer just a memorial, it became a living space again. I hosted gatherings for friends, created a workshop in the garage where I built furniture as a new hobby, planted a garden in the backyard with Tyler's favorite trees. 2 years after Tyler's death, I received an unexpected letter. It was from a young man named Jason, who had been one of Tyler's junior colleagues at the architectural firm. "Your son changed my life," he wrote. "When no one else would take a chance on a kid from the wrong side of town with no connections, Tyler saw my potential. He mentored me, challenged me, believed in me. I just received my architectural license, and I wanted you to know that his influence made this possible." I invited Jason to the house, where he shared more stories of Tyler's kindness and professional generosity. "He never mentioned these things," I said, deeply moved by the accounts of my son's impact on others. "He wouldn't," Jason replied with a smile. "He didn't do good things for recognition. He just did them because that's who he was." In that moment, I felt an overwhelming pride and peace. Despite the betrayal and pain of his final months, Tyler had lived authentically according to the values we shared. His legacy was not the fraudulent documents Amanda had created, not the manipulated will or forged signatures, but the lives he had touched, the people he had helped, the integrity he had maintained. The detective in me had pursued justice with methodical determination. The father in me had found something even more valuable, the truth of who my son really was. Today, 3 years after Tyler's passing, the house stands as a testament to resilience and love. I have finally finished editing and publishing Tyler's manuscript, adding my own chapters to complete what he began. Building Foundations has touched many readers who find in our story echoes of their own family relationships. The betrayal and legal battle taught me profound lessons about justice, patience, and the power of truth. Amanda's deception was calculated and cruel, but in the end, it could not erase the bond between father and son. If anything, fighting for Tyler's legacy strengthened that connection beyond death. I still have moments of deep sadness, days when I would give anything for one more conversation with my boy. But those moments no longer define me. Instead, I find meaning in continuing the work of justice and compassion that we both valued. What would you do if faced with such betrayal? Would you have the patience to build a case methodically, or would anger drive your actions? Has anyone in your life taught you the kind of values that sustained me through this ordeal? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story of justice and healing touched you, please like and subscribe. Every week, I share another story of overcoming life's challenges, and I would be honored to have you join our community of survivors and thrivers. Thank you for listening, and remember that in even our darkest moments, truth and love remain our strongest foundations.